And we are live. Hello and welcome to another episode of our weekly podcast. This is FreudenFreude, where we bring you content to help you grow and develop as a person and as a leader.
I am Sandra Corona,
And I'm Claudia, and
and
we
we are
coaches.
coaches.
We are coaches.
Someday. Well, hi, I am a coach for leaders, for the neurodiverse community, and for young professionals.
And I am a coach working with professionals, entrepreneurs, leaders, as well as their teams in tech and beyond.
Great. So today's topic is your brain as a protector, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. What started this conversation?
What started this conversation was actually we talked yesterday, and I just shared how shocked I am really with how much we have forgotten about the horrors of the whole COVID experience that we lived through. And now it's 2024. 4 years ago, we were in the midst of the lockdown and, truly affected by it. It was such a big upheaval and everything. And, even last year already, so only 3 years about how much was it not really um, in our psyche anymore. It has kind of been forgotten about to the most part. And I think this process started as soon as we were able to take off our masks and things were, we could frequent again the places we want to frequent, the shops, things like that. And I think it was really for me quite crazy how quickly we readapted to this and forgot really about the trauma that was COVID. And so we came to see, and I said it myself, that yes, but this is essentially one of the protection mechanisms that our brain puts in place to keep us not in the throes of this trauma constantly. It is this forgetting of traumatic experiences, this oblivion of letting go of those memories.
Correct. I think if we're talking about all the horrors of COVID, let's not forget all the horrors of all the past experiences that the world has lived, and that you can probably claim, if you want to, is to say, well, I didn't live it. Well, yeah, but there's history, there's a story, right? That you can read and live and learn from it. Yet, as humans, we reject anything after a certain time that reminds you of the bad times, and you just want to move forward and forget all about it, and we just never learn. That's the truth. um I think I said it probably like about a month ago, where I said that we have this thing that, depending on the case, it's either 3 weeks, 3 seconds, 3 months, or 3 years. I see it as the three. That's my very personal opinion, of how much you want to retain your negative experiences. And I do believe, based on what you're saying, that now the whole world has forgotten about COVID. It is now, thankfully, thanks to medicine, thanks to the vaccines that we were talking about it yesterday, but thanks to all of that, we can now treat COVID as almost as close to the flu, right? Because it's still killing people. So that's why I quote unquote. Um, and yet a lot of people have now forgotten. They just say, well, you know what? Out with the old, right? Old memories, bad stuff, and in with the new good experiences and everything else. And then we're gonna get caught off guard again. It could be in 3 years, it can be in 5 years, it can be 10, 15, 20. And we're gonna say, oh my God, how did this happen?
Right. And
We forget.
I agree. We should obviously learn from our experiences. We should put mechanisms in place to prevent a disaster like that from happening again. I think, however, it is important to stress here that this forgetting has nothing to do with bad intention or wanting to push aside those things. I think it's a mechanism that is natural for our brain and that nature has put in place so that we can deal with the aftermath, that we can get back to normal literally as quickly as possible in order to resume normal human functioning.
Mhm.
So, and especially if we want to learn from this experience, it is up to us to put in the effort to reflect and take appropriate action. Nature will make us forget. And it's really important, I think, for us to notice that there's nothing wrong with it, but that's the default modus operandi of us as human animals, if you so wish. And that if we want to learn from this, we have to put in extra effort.
Yes. And you know what I was thinking is that um, there's a difference between wishful thinking, and I'm going to explain why I'm saying this. There's a difference between wishful thinking and take action. And there's the human beings out there that are actually taking action to be prepared. We call them the preppers, right? I mean, there's an extreme, there's the regulars, or there's the extreme, the ones that we know that are like for 25, 30, 50 years prepared and all this kind of stuff. But I'm talking about simple right now, and I'm going to explain the example I was giving you yesterday about the dog. As a dog lover, an honest and real true dog lover, um, I was driving down the freeway coming back from the vet, and I saw something furry thing on the side, and I was like, please let it be a carpet, don't let it be that, don't let it be that. And I realized that it was a little dog. Um, and in my mind, I just started like, no, 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 he deserves better. He so deserves so much better. And my mind just went into like this thing about pain and suffering, mental suffering, let's put it that way. And then there was this struggle of, no, 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 calm down, you can't do anything. But then in my mind, that can't do anything was, I shifted, my mind went into this imaginary wishful thinking idea that I took care of that little puppy by stopping by on the freeway. Don't ask me why, how I did this, but it was in my mind. It was a way of saving myself. I stopped on the freeway, picked up the baby, put him in a little box, and then I went and buried it and gave it a decent ending because it was like a way of letting him know that he was loved even till the end, that somebody cares. I did that in my mind. And then after I did that, I calmed down and I kept on with my day. And then I realized what I had just done, which is go into the denial stage and say, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Just in order for me to function, to continue with my day and come home and hug my dogs because, oh my God, after what I saw, what I felt, it is horrible. So your brain goes into that type of behavior because some things are just too much for you to handle based on your values, your beliefs, and all this kind of thing. And it's sad that I had to do the wishful thinking versus actually stopping and making a difference. I should have done that. And now I have regrets, right? But then those regrets, I'm going to forget them eventually just for my sake, just for my well being. And what's going to happen the next time that I see another dog? I'm going to go through the same thing again. And I'm going to think the same thing. And I'm not going to do anything about it. But that's what we do as humans. So it is so sad. So
Right.
sad.
Well, I think that the 2 points to this. The first one, this mechanism that you're describing, is again a way for the brain to protect us from this psychological discomfort, from these distressing thoughts, and it's called repression, actually. And so you and we all know this from psychologists often talking about repressed memories, maybe
Mhm.
of a traumatic experience and so on. But even on the everyday level, there can be something like this compartmentalization of, it's going to be okay, and I did my part, I can't do it all, and so on. So again, there it's the brain trying to protect us. And our thoughts naturally go to that because we can't just sit and stew in those thoughts of discomfort. Okay. But interestingly enough, I think that this and you had this experience with this dog, which is very unfortunate, and I can absolutely relate that it's very distressing. But I just want to see that very often you don't need to see it or touch it or have it in your context, meaning on the side of your road, literally ready to right there in your reality. But we actually respond sometimes just as strongly and just as emotionally to news we get of a
Mhm.
story shared on social media, of something we read in the news, of a video we see, and things like that. And just see what that can do to you on a stress level, and the requirements to cope with getting bombarded by things like that. And
Mhm.
especially nowadays on social media, for instance, with these predictive kind of things, that they show you things
Oh,
that you have engaged with in the past. So
mhm.
should you at some point engage with a video like that about an animal that has not been treated well, and you say, I really hate this, well, guess what? More and more of those things are going to show up in your feed, and you're then just at the mercy of seeing those things over and over and over again. So it makes it very, very difficult for us sometimes now to emotionally regulate.
Yes.
And so and that incidentally is another mechanism our brain uses, all these various strategies to help us to modulate our emotions so that we do not become overwhelmed by these repeated stressors and triggers and things like that. And sometimes you need to, however, not only rely on your brain, but actually take measures to maybe curb exposure to such stimuli, like, telling LinkedIn or whatever your social media of choice is not to show you images like this, not to show you posts like that, or just literally move away from them and not expose yourself to it so much, because it can be very, very stressful in the long run. Yeah.
I've always wondered if I do that, what am I actually doing? I'm protecting myself. I'm clear about that. But I'm also understanding that I am um what would be the word? Not denying what is really happening, but it is in a way to say that. It's like not watching the news. Why? Because everything is negative, everything is bad, everything is kills you. Typical. If it's not good for you, it's killing you. Um, um, there's always something out there that is going to be sad to see, to watch, to hear. And so shutting down everything is kind of like putting yourself in a little bubble, right? And not wanting to see the truth about what is happening. And I wonder, if that is the case for a lot of people, that are deniers of things. We were talking about the deniers. I don't want to be specific about it, but I think sometimes we have to be honest and be a little bit controversial, I'm sorry. The COVID deniers, you know. I'm not saying that it wasn't what it was, but it also was there for us to see. I mean, a lot of them were saying, well, let's not forget about the Spanish flu. It was the same thing, and the Spanish flu killed much more people or less people. I can't remember. I mean, it's like, okay, the Spanish flu was the Spanish flu. That was back then. That was something else. You know, let's not compare. We're living this moment right now. We're watching people die. We're watching children die. We're watching young people die. What is your point? I just thought in my mind as a centrist, I have to say I'm a centrist in the way that I am neither one or side or the other. It's just in my own logic, and what makes sense to me is what I go with. And I would just say, look, if a mask has been so far good for doctors, right, in the operating room and in so many other situations, hazardous situations and all that, why is it not going to be good for me to cover myself? So why not do it? I mean, nobody was forcing me to do it. If I didn't want to wear it, I would just not go out, right? But a lot of us like to push the envelope and we like to do all these kind of things. What does this have to do with your brain? Well, some people choose to challenge things because that's what they do. That's what makes them feel good about the circumstances. For me, the way that I protected myself was to say, well, you want to say that a mask is me being a sheep. Well, so then are doctors sheep too because they're wearing it in the operating room? No, I think I'm going to go with what makes sense to me. And I would wear it just for my own personal sake. And I know that a lot of us that would be called like shift blaming, right? When people would say, well, people are dying because you are not doing what you're supposed to be doing. But then at the same time, how many people were immune to it, right? And we just have to, at the end of the day, for our brains to function, we do what is best for us to do, whether it's shift blaming, whether it's denying, whether it's derailing the facts, whether whatever it is, we do what we have to do to protect ourselves because that's our brain in
Right,
full function. That's what it is.
right, right. Very good point. And I think that um, in coaching or psychology jargon, when your brain is trying to deal with these conflicting beliefs and conflicting pieces of information that it can't harmonize by itself, it's called cognitive dissonance.
Mm,
And in order to reduce that, the brain is trying to align, to find somehow an alignment. Uh, when we are in situations like that, however, our stress levels are very high. And
mhm,
I think that's why a lot of people fall into these more extreme ways of expressing them and acting out, essentially. It is just trying to create or see one reality in which those conflicts no longer exist. And if I become extreme in a certain belief, then the conflicting thing is so much further away that it gets more and more minimized. Okay, so there again, there's nature behind it as well. Well, we obviously do not want people acting out. I'm not proposing that, but there's reasons why sometimes, especially in a very stressful context like COVID was, more people than normal were acting out because it was so destabilizing. Okay. And this is just a way, again, of the brain to make sense of it all and therefore protect its inner belief system, its references. And, obviously, we lost a lot of our fixed points and references during COVID because all of a sudden many things that we as a society even believe for as long as we're alive and as long as all the people that we know are alive, we're there. Like health, job security, food that you can buy, and things like that, and toilet paper, for all I care. But it was always there, and you never gave it a second thought. All of a sudden, you had to, and so your brain tries to figure out, well, what's my new reality? And sometimes going into extremes helps mitigate a little bit these conflicts between juxtaposed kind of beliefs. Yeah.
You know what I was thinking, Claudia, remembering, I'm sorry, about my experience with bringing the dogs and what I experienced in Frankfurt. Um,
Maybe give a little bit of a context.
yeah, yeah. So I'm trying to see how I can simplify it, but there's really no way. So I got stuck in Frankfurt for 7 days, and that was because number one, there was a
Strike.
a strike. Thank you very much for the airline that I was flying and with the dogs. And then there was the strike just completely threw us off completely. They didn't want to put the dogs in the airplane. And then the dogs were put on the lost and found. And then the dogs that I was bringing with me were taken by my husband because he was bringing the other two dogs. We have a total of four. And so they crossed paths and it was a complete mess. Okay. Anybody that, anybody, period, anybody wants for things to come out the best way as possible, right? Or the way that we want them to. That's the correct word. We want things to be done the way we want them to happen. And when they don't happen, our brain goes into this, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, it's everything's horrible, everything's terrible. I'm suffering, I'm struggling. Oh my God, my dogs and everything else. But when you put all of those emotions to the side and you see what's really happening, you're like, number one, the airline took care of me 100% and my dogs. I was put in a very nice hotel. My dogs were taken care of in the airport at the ARC. That's what they call it, the airport evat services. All those 7 days. Um, I was fed, not completely. I had to put in money, which I didn't mind because you always have to be prepared, right? Um, and then, yes, it was an annoyance to be going to the airport every single day, hoping that there would be a flight that day for you to leave. And then having to go back home defeated because things didn't happen your way. And emotions start happening after 7 days. Emotions do get the best of you. And when every time I wanted to cry, I had to stop myself and say, number one, I'm not a victim. There was no reason for me to even think I had to cry other than frustration. What was my frustration? Things were not going my way. And that's when I would snap and say, okay, so if things are not going my way, what is my third option? Read. Read what you can and what is within your reach. Okay. Get informed. And then once you get informed and you're observing what is in front of you, then you probably have options. You can probably offer it even to the airline, right? Because sometimes the airlines, they're so busy thinking and doing and all this kind of stuff, but they don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. Both of you are relying, but then you have to work as a team with situations like this. So at the end, yes, I left. Obviously, I'm here now. Um, but my brain constantly I had to put a stop to my brain and say, you're not a victim. You can solve this. What is that you have in front of you that you can use? Information, read. So at the end of the day, I think that if you want to help your brain to snap out of that frame of what am I going to do? What's happening? And stress and denial and all this kind of stuff. Sorry, my dogs are playing. Um, um, what is that you have in front of you is information. What can you do, right? How can you solve things? Honey, can you help me with the doggy? Thank you. So that's all I can say. Sorry, my brain just went to the side with
Right.
the dog.
But it went right back there. It went right back. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So kudos for you actually that you managed to rein it in like this, because it is actually a another protection mechanism of the brain to liberate adrenaline and endorphins and things like that in a situation like that you perceive as being frustrating or difficult or challenging or just not going your way, because the brain knows that once these hormones are circulating through your system, you're going to have more energy, you're going to be able to jump out of the way. Because remember, we were not reading creatures and information creatures from the very beginning. We were get away from the tiger creatures from the very,
Mm-hmm,
and our brain is still a 2 million-year-old structure. Okay. I mean, we have ways to go until this organ up here catches up with evolution. So we are still Neanderthals in terms of biology. And back then, it really was helpful to have this burst of nervous energy to be able to get the lay of the land quickly and move quickly and things like that. So fundamentally, a protection mechanism by the brain. But
mm-hmm.
it's not always helpful in the world that we live in today. So kudos to you that you were able to rein it in, bring it back to a more cognitive level of understanding and analyzing and reading and tackling it that way. Okay.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, let's nevertheless, even though it might be uncomfortable in the moment, thank our brain for yet another protection mechanism that it puts into it. Because another one actually that is maybe a little bit related is the whole fight or flight response that we
Mm-hmm,
have when we are faced with a threat, which goes again to this tiger in the woods kind of threat. Either you fight, you flee, or sometimes you freeze,
free.
because
Mm-hmm,
that is another option that you have. There too, it is not this bumbling along and not being able to make this decision and act, because all of those three are actions. You fight, you flight, you freeze. They're decisions that are being taken, and our brain gets us a very long way there in a fraction of a second.
mm-hmm,
Okay. Very, very quickly. So there's a lot that our brain tries to do to protect us. And sometimes, unfortunately, some of the things misfire, right? Because you
mm-hmm.
might be in a fight mode with all this adrenaline, all these endorphins, while your brain cognitively is trying to figure things out. And there's cognitive dissonance and there's repression and there's so there can be a lot happening there. Absolutely. Very
You know
cool.
what I also realized, Claudia, is that sometimes we insert ourselves into problems. That's the truth. I was, I, something about me is that I like to watch videos about uh things, how people behave and respond and react to certain things. And one of them, I was watching a family that was in a wedding, and no need to mention race. I think this happens in any family. Um, the brother goes crazy for whatever reason. You could understand what happened and why it, whatever. He just went crazy, hit the groom, which was his brother-in-law now, and pushes his sister. And so instead of people focusing Okay, this is a huge problem that I see a lot. That instead of people focusing on solving the situation, on calming down and de-escalating the situation, the mom chooses to make it about her. And she makes it worse because the other brothers come and start. I mean, you hear your mother screaming and you immediately go into overdrive to protect your mom. That's what a lot of people do. I cannot say everybody. So most children do. You go into overdrive and say, what's going on to my mom? We all protect her. And so when you start hearing your mom scream, you start reacting like, who do I have to hit, right? Instead of asking questions. If we were to first ask questions and try to listen and understand the situation, something else would be the situation, which would mean everything would be calm and everything would calm down. But rather, we choose to scream, we choose to react, we choose to, like, what do I have to do? And just tell me, who do I have to hit, mom? And all this kind of stuff. And everybody was screaming because now the brothers are protecting their mom. And then the daughter of the bride is now being protective and she's screaming at her uncles and her grandmother to say, calm down. So you have this screaming match happening. And it was an hour and a half video of screaming.
Wow. Wow.
And then you have the police trying to de-escalate, but then there's always the cop that comes in, and instead of de-escalating, he starts screaming because everybody's screaming and just craziness. And I'm thinking, I mean, is this a race related? Is this a cultural related thing? No. I realize that this happens with everybody that does not have the emotional intelligence to sit down and say, okay, and unfortunately, not everybody's going to have it because this is a huge family. This is a wedding where everybody is out there listening and screaming. So you would hope that out of, I don't know, 20 people that are out there screaming and having the screaming match, you would hope that at least five people have the emotional intelligence to know when to step back and let the police handle it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It,
so so that's what I noticed, that if people were to stop inserting themselves into certain situations also, your brain would not have to be constantly hitting the delete button to say, stop screaming, stop protecting yourself, you're not a victim, and this and that. I mean, step back.
right, just the emotional charge that goes with a lot of things is very counterproductive very often. It's one of the first lessons I learned actually as a mediator is
Mm,
when you're in conflict, it's the time really to communicate. But because you're in conflict, you're less and less able to communicate.
mhm,
And so, as a mediator, part one of any kind of thing is to dial down the emotions in the room and dial down the heat to a point that people catch this proverbial breath again, that the more cognitive functions are able to kick in. Because without communication, unless you kill somebody to get them out of the way, then there's no more conflict. But something has to give, and a lot of that happens, hopefully not through violence, but through communication. And so, you know, just when you need it the most, you're less and less able to communicate. You're
mhm,
less and less able to think clearly. And having awareness of your own state is really important. And by extension, if you're emotionally intelligent, also being aware of the state of the others that you're interacting with, and not on top of it feeding into the drama of it all, but trying to dial it down a notch. It's easier said than done, because once you have a herd of people like that out there in the screaming match, it's like, okay, you guys just do what you have to do.
You know what I have to say is that I think if we wanted to see what it would look like a world with managed and controlled emotions, and hear me out, I think is would be Star Trek. Star Trek is supposed to be the future. Star Trek is showing you what it would be a world without um uh without so much emotion, but other than controlling yourself, without all of these things, the biases that we have. I mean, there's still biases clearly because you're explorers, so you're encountering new cultures and you have to get used to it. But you also see that the captain has the ability to guide their people into understanding and accepting other cultures, other ideologies, beliefs, and traditions and all this kind of stuff. And I'm wondering, you know, if we had more people like that, or if we were at least trying to imitate these shows that a lot of us watch, we would be a little bit different. We would be better because, let's say, for example, Vulcan, okay, like Spock. Spock is a clear example, and they mention it over and over how his race was about violence, right? Because that's a response. Sometimes we cannot avoid it. Sometimes we see something on the street or we see somebody and they do something to us. And what is our response immediately in our brains? We're acting violent and we're punching them exactly and doing all this kind of stuff. And we want to throw them against the wall. And yet here we are, like you look at us and we have this very calm demeanor, right? While our brain is just going like this. And his race or his culture evolutionized to a point where they're now in control of their emotions, but now you have it in excess of control emotions where they don't cry, they don't feel, they're not happy, they're not disappointed, nothing. You don't want to get to that point. You just want something that is in the middle. And it is possible as long as you start putting to the side your emotions. And I think that's what's wrong right now in with the society, Claudia. We were talking about um how now nobody wants to work. Remember I was telling you that? Like I've noticed that here in the States. I don't know in Luxembourg or um I've seen it in other countries where I've had amazing customer service. Here, I am so disappointed to see that people no longer want to work. That what they call the woke culture, where people is like, if something is not working for me, sorry, I'm not going to do more for you. Okay. And we were talking about the tip, right? Where you go, you buy something. Okay, simple coffee at Starbucks. Number one, you walk into there, at least because I'm educated. I come in and I say, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. Because they used to tell you as soon as you would walk into through the door, they would say, "Hi, welcome to Starbucks." And the right thing to say is, "Hi, good morning, thank you," or something like that, right? Now they no longer say that. I'm okay. You don't have to. Fine. But if I say good morning, if I approach you when I'm going to buy the coffee and I say good morning, I'm at least expecting a good morning back, right? Two, um, the behavior, the way they like, what would you like, this and that, and like you're asking for stuff, and now I'm almost sometimes like, can I ask for extra coffee or can I ask for an extra shot of almond milk? You know, because their faces is like you're begging for their attention for service, and then on top of that, they have the audacity to ask you for a 15%, 20%, 25, and 30%. They're like, well, wait a second. You didn't say good morning to me. You took my order like if you were doing me a favor. And three, I have to say, may I please, can I? Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. You have to like say thank you three times because they make you feel like they're really doing you a favor.
Right, right. And
Yeah. And
then in the end, you end up tipping them because you're going to go back there at some point. And, you if you don't tip them, then service is going to be even worse. Right,
exactly. And so what does your brain do is that rather than to say, well, you know what? They said good morning. They're giving me what I want. They're smiling. I don't say people have to smile, let it be clear, okay? But good service, when you don't give tip, you immediately just say, okay, you know what? Here's your tip because you did something good. Thank you very much for the service. It wouldn't hurt me to give them a tip. But 15%? Come on, that's $15, $20 out of an order. That's a lot. Okay. So my brain is going to say, nope, I'm not going to tip you. And I'm already afraid. Let me put it that way. Okay. Fear is the base of everything. So I'm already afraid that the moment that I say, no, I'm not going to tip you, because number one, you work for a corporation that is supposed to be paying you. Two, people are supposed to be able to give you tips if they want to, rather than out of fear because you might not give me good service. So the moment that I click, no, I'm not going to give you a tip, I'm already worried how you're going to treat me from that point on.
right. And then very often the mechanism is that you just give in, right? You just do it out of, because it's not even worth your while, right, to deal with the aftermath of this fear or perceived fear and so on, and worrying about your future with these people that are supposed to serve you, etc. Then in the end you
Mhm.
just say, okay, I'm just going to tip, I'm just going to go, but in the end it leaves this really bitter taste in your mouth. And sadly, you see it quite often that people are very disengaged, can't be
Mhm.
bothered,
Mhm.
and so on. And you see it. And incidentally, this is now a customer service thing. There are people in a coffee shop, but we see this disengagement also very much in corporate. We see it. People are just there watching the clock, doing the minimum, getting bothered if anything is asked of them to go maybe the extra mile.
Yep.
Proactivity is missing. It's a reality, and I think statistics nowadays say that it's about 1 in 8 who is not only disengaged but actively disengaged,
Oh
meaning
yeah.
they're the ones that are even vocal about not wanting to be there, and so on and so on. So
Mhm.
it's really it's a very true issue. Well, what's at the root cause of that? That remains to be seen, and I think it is very context dependent. We do not know what the working environment is for those Starbucks people, how they
Mhm.
have been trained, how the relationship is within the team or with their leader, how they're being paid, and things like that. So
Yeah.
we do not have enough visibility into that, but we can observe um, what they do, and we can see how it makes ourselves feel.
Mhm.
And that's the only data that we can go into onto that. And then sometimes, yeah, it helps to say, well, we do not know what their experience is like.
Yes, I agree with you 100% on that because one of the clearest example that happened about 6 years ago, 5 to 6 years ago, the Amazon employees, the chauffeurs, the drivers, um, they cannot have a bathroom break. They have to uh, use water bottles to do their needs in those water bottles. They cannot stop. And then the environment conditions in the bodega or in the distribution center is nonstop. Like you have to be this, and there's cartoons. Okay, one of them being South Park, one of them being there's a Netflix series called Evil, where there was a very interesting episode. Um, they call it the whisper, okay, the ear whisper, something like I remember whisper, and and this is about a company that was having trying to gather into creating a uh what's it called, a one of those where employees come together and then they can no longer be fired, so rather, instead of them negotiating their salary increases,
A
uh,
union.
union, thank you, oh my gosh, so they were trying to band together to create a union. But there was this person that would come in into every event. How did he find out? We don't know. But to every meeting, secret meeting that they had, he would come in, interrupt the meeting, and they would have to leave because they could no longer talk. And so it turns out that the whisperer was this guy that was coming in to talk to them and try to convince them not to band together into creating this union because it was not in favor of the company, right? So why did they call him the whisperer? Because the guy would work from home and he would have all these cameras, all these things, images well, sorry, screens in front of his screen, watching the employees work. And every time they wanted to take a bathroom break or wanted to rest or they were just drinking water, he would talk to them through their headset and tell them, right now you cannot take a break. What are you doing? You have to start working and continue. Look at those boxes. And so he would be the whisperer. Well, they got rid of the whisperer. He got fired. And then the guy that was trying to put together the union, he gets promoted into being the new whisperer. And guess what? It was a non-ending.
Yeah.
And all these people thought that it was going to be better now with one of their guys being now promoted. It's an endless cycle. And you can see these people wanting to kill him. The brain, it's the need of trying to survive, of trying to defend yourself. What's the only way that sometimes some people just think and act is on violence.
Right. And there's on top of it this role identification that also happens, that can also not be understated. You might remember this, and I do not know the exact specifics, but they took a group of volunteers in this psychological experiment, and they turned some of them into prisoners and some of them into guards. And even
Mm,
though these people were just normal people off the street that had not necessarily any very specific violent tendencies or whatever, it turned out that the guards became really overbearing and sometimes even violent to the point that they had to stop the experiment, because this role identification and the strip that you get when you're given power, and you forget that you're also giving a responsibility. It's very easy for some people to really get drunk on that and to over.
mm,
So not all things that our brain does are in our favor. Like not all of us not all of them protect us. Actually, one of the sayings that I always say: don't assume that the brain is your friend. Your brain is not your friend. Very often it does things to make its own job easier, like forgetting, like giving you a million excuses not to do something you don't want to do, not believing things that are obviously based in fact because it doesn't really fit into what you believed before, and so on, and so on, and so on. So don't believe that the brain is your friend. And my most favorite one is: do not believe every thought that comes into your head.
mm,
Okay.
mhm,
I always use this analogy of your thoughts. Think of them like the bubbles that raise up in a glass of champagne.
mhm,
They appear out of nowhere, and they disappear into the ether. Once they go up, they go pop and they're gone. Right. So
mhm,
you cannot always believe or act on every single thought that you have to have some level of critical thinking and analysis on your own thoughts. Are they really valid? Stress test your assumptions, and so on, so that you can make truly educated and thoughtful decisions and take appropriate action. So the brain is not always your friend, even though we just discussed a whole series of mechanisms your brain puts in place to protect you on some occasions. So
You're
there.
right. The brain, this is what I think. Um, the responses that we have, they either come from our gut or our heart. And that immediately goes into your brain, and your brain starts uh starts working on what to do in order to solve, to help, to give a solution to whatever you're feeling or to whatever you're reacting to. Right? So you're right, it's don't believe everything your brain thinks, because it's either visceral or it's emotional, and it's not necessarily in your favor. You're absolutely right. I love that. Um, and I have that thought every time, when I go to the dog park and you hear a dog whining and complaining, and you're like, you know, let's watch what's going on, because normally sometimes there's things that are going on. We don't know the behaviors of the people, the dog, the animal, whatever. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that if we all were a little bit more understanding, right? And a little bit less about me, yes, our brains would probably be a little bit friendlier to say, what are you afraid of? Because we react and behave based on our behaviors. I mean, fears.
Right, right.
And we would be better, a little bit better, probably a little bit better. I'm not saying better, but a little bit better.
Yeah, a little bit. And I think maybe a term that I might use, and it might not apply to all scenarios, is a little bit of well-intentioned curiosity.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, a friend of mine always used to say when there was drama in the air, and she would always say, let's give the universe an opportunity to rise to the occasion. Like literally, let's give things a chance and not overreact
Mhm,
instantly. I think that
mhm.
and just be curious about how things unfold, have a little bit awareness of how it makes us feel, and also where these triggers are actuated from. Is it things we feel? Is it emotions that bubble up? Is it reactions that we have that are maybe based on bias or whatever? So really like take a step back and observe, like with a state maybe of mindfulness, observer with a little bit of
Yeah.
distance, and then a
Mhm.
little bit of patience and some well-intentioned curiosity. That would already go very, very far. In my personal experience, I find that that is something you can train. It might not be natural from day one, but as you get into a habit of doing it more and more, it becomes easier. You're never going to get immune to the frustration. You're never going to get, that you don't have moments of road rage when somebody cuts you off or something
Yeah.
like that. I mean, it's going to stay. But I'm saying if we look at a running average over time, I think that you can learn to have a little bit more grace under pressure
Yeah.
and and just stay a little bit more even keeled and we don't want to turn into Spocks, right, where we are so tightly controlled that there's nothing else. We also do not want to become the true empath like we also have on Star Trek, where you pick up on everything that's going on, and it's really hard for these empaths sometimes to manage this, but it's kind of like in the middle. Yes, let's be aware what's happening outside. Let's be open to understanding or observing what's going on with others. Let's take it into account. But then, on the other hand, also let's have a little bit of control, not to let um, reactions or drama or emotional uh, over what over
Whelming.
emotions going into overdrive, just ruling it all. So it's just a little bit more Yeah, even keel, a little bit more middle of the road.
And
Yeah.
this, I have to say that me personally, I wish that we have millennials and Gen Z watching this, because millennials are now agreeing with the Generation X that you and I are. They now are seeing what we used to say. They're now realizing that what we were fighting for is is logical, because now they're having those problems with the Generation X, where they don't want to work, they want things to be done their way, and if they're not agreeing to something, they immediately start responding. Like you say, there's no intention of going the extra mile. Now, let's remember that in our generation, going the extra mile was abusive, and it was controlling, it was a lot, okay? Because they would say, can you help us? And you would have to find yourself working on the weekends to help for free. The millennials came and changed that word to say, well, if I'm going to have to come to work on a Saturday, I'm going to look for a compensation. That was a good thing. But now Generation X is like, you know what? The weekend, it's my day off. I already have this thing going on. Sorry, you're going to have to look for somebody else. And if the company responds, well, you're not working for us, we're going to have to fire you, it's like, oh, and they go crazy and all this kind of stuff. So, is there ever going to be a response that's going to be found in the middle? No, no, there's never going to be anything. But let's be honest, right now we're struggling, and we need for people to step up to the plate to do their jobs. And if you want me as a patron to come in and pay you that 50% that you're asking me to pay, then give me the service that I'm asking for. I hope that people start realizing and stop pushing so much, because while the other ones are pulling, the other ones are pushing, and it's just not going to happen.
Right, right. And maybe it's also an opportunity in disguise that the ones that are able to smile, like in your example, and really give good customer service, they're the ones that can set themselves apart and maybe then get promoted or whatever, right? I mean, it's sometimes it's just doing what's right or doing what's expected nowadays. That's a differentiator. It is.
Yeah.
Of course, I want to say it again here. We're on a podcast. We're generalizing. We're giving sometimes extreme examples just to make a point. I
Mhm.
want to re-emphasize here that we know that these are generalizations
Yes.
or extreme cases, but they're for educational purposes only. And we know that there are plenty of really decent, hardworking people out there that are doing an outstanding job. Okay. So just that being said.
Yes. And let me just give a last example yesterday. Not that I am bragging about this, but um, there we were at the stoplight, and people are now cleaning your windows. Well, not now, but it's happening. But anyways, yesterday we were at a stoplight, and this guy was cleaning windows. And I told my husband, "Hey, do you have any change?" And he's like, "No." And then he starts looking at, "I have $2." And we're waiting for the guy to come and clean our window. Well, he never came. He moves to the side, and then he says, honk at the guy. I did that. And he comes running, and we give him the $2, and we're like, you know what? This is because you're working. So thank you for just working. Because this is where my brain went into this overdrive, where I said, well, at least he's not stealing from me. He's working. It might be in a street corner cleaning windows, and they might look worse than what, but he's making the effort. Okay. And that I was grateful for. So imagine if Starbucks, if CVS or pharmacies and everything else, everybody else had this behavior, I would not have a problem with giving a tip. And I know for a fact, talking with the people that I'm getting to know, is that they all think the same way as I do. Because now it seems that it's a luxury, that that you're appreciative of the service, whereas before, maybe that's a good thing at the same time, whereas before we were expecting the customer service. And now it's like, oh, please let this be the person that gives a good customer service.
Yeah, it's I think that they're extremes because if there's just no good service, it makes it also difficult for the patrons. And if the patrons then get disgruntled, then
Oh, yeah.
you the service people are less incentivized even to give good service, and then it's a downward spiral, right? The
Yep,
question is just what's going to give, and here we do not have the answer, at least not
exactly.
right now. But it is true. So we certainly did an excursion today on our show, Brain as Protector, where we did touch at least a little bit on the topic of the show. But it's that's just the way we roll here. So unless you have something else to add, maybe let's conclude here.
No, I think we've said, like you say, a lot. Um, I think at the end, if you were to connect everything that Claudia and I said, these are behaviors that we have and we experience every single day. Um, they might not sound to a lot of people like this is the way the brain protects you, but it is, right? Again, the response is that you give me a service, I give you in response something in exchange for that service, and that is your brain functioning like it should be. But when you don't get those kind of things, your brain starts becoming violent and saying, well, now I'm not going to give you anything. At the end of the day, it's behavioral and it's your brain trying to make reason out of everyday life,
Right.
period. So
Very.
thank you, Claudia.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So there's very often just nature running its course, and sometimes it's productive, sometimes it's not, and so that's the challenge of being human, I guess, in
That's
today's
right.
day
That's
and age.
right.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for being here with us, listening in. We really appreciate it. You can get in touch with Sandra or myself. Our contact information is in the show notes related to this video. Also, if you like what you heard, please consider subscribing to the channel, click the notification bell, and otherwise engage with our content. We would greatly appreciate it. We will be back with much more in the coming weeks, so please stay tuned and we hope to see you again. Thank you, Sandra. This was fun. Take care.
Thank you, Claudia. Bye bye.